as some of you know, we are part of LETUS, and that's Lawrence Ecology Teams United in Sustainability. Simple. I say that in part because Ken is the representative from the Jewish congregation here in town. We have representatives from 9 different faith communities who come together and plan and schedule events as best as we can, and also join in advocacy where we feel like it's important or we can be helpful. And Ken is that. And Ken will talk later, but he's already taken some steam. He has a wonderful, one of his writings is this about Wild Douglas County, but he's known, and of course most of you may know him from his very articulate support for the Prairie Park Center Prairie and other things. He's been a long time environmentalist, and he's also led some of our eco team walks that we've done in terms of eco treks. So it's just a pleasure to have you, Ken, with us and for him to do a presentation. So I think I've taken too much of your time. I'm going to let Ken take the rest. Thank you.
And I would like to thank Thad for really starting the LETUS organization and keeping it going when it needs a little prodding now and then, and his tireless activism has been an essential part of our community. So, I would like to start by saying that I'm inviting the more than human earth and in the form of things that are here locally. This rock has been in the Lawrence area for over 250 million years, and so I've invited it to come to the top today. This is probably a couple of years old. It was a buck that lost its horn antlers last spring, and the cedar tree is something I had to trim so I could get out a few days ago. And it's been a resident of Douglas County for, its relatives have been here for many, many, many years as well. So I do that kind of as an introduction to what I'm showing here. I'm going to read a lot today, partly because I want to make sure I don't forget things, but I'm going to also talk a little bit about there's all kinds of conversations going on around this, and these bird tracks are tracks that basically tell us about something that is no longer there, sort of like our writing, okay? If you think about what writing is, writing tells us about things that are not present. And so nature has a lot of presence in the same way. I'm trying to figure out how we're gonna do this. Maybe I have to be over here. And if you look at cuneiform, I apologize if I'm away here.
Maybe someone could sit there and be your person. That guy.
Oh. Yeah. That guy.
He's trainable.
That's right. Hey, you. I thought that was it. So it's that one right there, whenever.
Down.
But wait. So I just put up a cuneiform here because I think it kind of is reminiscent of bird tracks. If you think about it, they may have been inspired by bird tracks in the mud. You know, that may have been something. It basically serves the same function. And so I do this because we are animals, and we have taken the tracks in our minds and in our activities, and we've turned them into tracks that we can read. And I think that that's an important thing for us to think about. Okay. We've gone quite a bit further than that. We have turned, if you look at the image around it, you can see it's a photograph of that. And, you know, visual images are increasingly replacing our words. And we receive photos and videos that engage us as much and sometimes even more than being there in person. And this is a problem sometimes because we think that this is more real than the actual thing. And so, you know, we spend more and more time watching movies and shows, YouTube, TikTok, etc. And that's been replacing Wikipedia, which were words, which were replacing, you know, encyclopedias before that. So there's a progression, and there's been a change, I'd say. And part of that is that, go ahead. It's changed our world to do this. And we've embedded ourselves into a virtual reality, some more than others. Almost all of us are increasingly enveloped in a techno-cultural cocoon, that's what I call it. That has been great, that has great attractions and convenience, but at the same time, this digitized reality has increasingly disconnected us from the rest of the living fabric of life, where most of the planet lives. Let me briefly expand on this a bit before going to the heart of this talk. Okay, you can't see that. Turn off the lights here. And that's kind of ironic because most people, because of the lights, can't see the stars anymore. And so, you know, before electricity, everybody had access to the sky. Everybody also knew the constellation. Anybody recognize the constellation here?
Orion.
That's right. So there's some people that see the three stars of the belt of Orion, and the Orion Nebula, the brightest star in the sky, which is Sirius, and the Hyades stars up in the upper right.
They look like drones too.
They look like drones, that's right. See, that's what's happening, right? And so, you know, we, you know, in agricultural and hunting and gathering societies, everybody knew also what the seasonal progression of the plants and animals on the land was, just like reading the constellations in the sky. When fishing was best, how much to harvest, how much to leave, where to go, who hunted who, all of these things were common knowledge. These rules became the local wisdom that was placed or based and passed down from generation to generation in order to keep those food sources healthy and productive over time. So it was really a matter of our life, you know, to be able to have this knowledge in ourselves. Okay? A vast majority of people no longer live in rural areas. We get our food from the grocers who ship in food from all over the world and live in a monetized lifestyle where they do jobs disconnected with the native landscapes that have largely disappeared and replaced by agricultural land use. Outdoor time is already spent in parks, sporting fields, stadiums, and urban spaces that have almost no relation to the ecosystems that they are on top of. Okay. This has turned into a problem. You know, our grandparents and great-grandparents were aware of all of the cycles that we talked about, or many of them were a much greater percentage than are today. And this locally placed wisdom was, like I say, part of the common knowledge. And they didn't have nearly as much ability to understand or perceive larger global pictures, though. Economies were built that used the Earth's resources in ways that we didn't understand, and what the consequences were for those technologies. As we built our nations, we did not have the tools to be able to measure the global temperature of the land, air, and ocean simultaneously in order to bring an understanding of this changing global climates, let alone tease out the role of fossil fuel emissions as the driving force behind the shifts in the atmosphere and oceanic chemistry that is forcing the warming. And as you can see, this is the latest spot is 2024. Let's see right there. It's above the 1.5 degrees of which has been, the scientific community said, well, if we can stay below 1.5 degrees, we can avoid the most dire consequences of what's happening. And what's happening is increasingly variable global monsoon precipitation, very wet, very dry weather, events and seasons. The confidence level is what the scientific community has in terms of the evidence. natural land, ocean carbon sinks, taking up the decreasing proportion of emissions. Nature used to be able to compensate with all the emissions by reabsorbing it, but that's decreasing. Reduced polar and ice and glaciers, global mean sea level rise, increased ocean acidification and deoxygenation of the waters, compound heat waves and droughts and wildfires across multiple locations, intensification of tropical cyclones and extratropical storms are the consequence of some of these, primarily being driven by fossil fuel emissions. And I know that we talked a little yesterday in the agricultural cycle and also contribute to that, but it's driven by fossil fuels. Okay? But I'm not talking about, you know, I don't want to spend a whole lot more time on these crises, other than to say that it's kind of a triple crisis facing humanity. We have ecological overshoots that is being driven by our global economies that require basically continual growth and continual finances and reinvestment and creation of new technologies that just keep that process going, which has created a global or ecological overshoot. Ecological overshoot is driving the biodiversity crisis because we fragment the ecosystems and we also are taking over a lot of the land that we're primarily, you know, degrading what's left, basically, through things like climate change. Social stratification, alienation from ecosystems, destabilizing mental health and community sustainability. In other words, we're animals too. And so we are being impacted in the same way as the rest of the web of life around us. Okay. So my purpose here is not to flesh out this triple crisis in more detail than I already have. Today my message is instead to say to each and every one of you that any solutions on this triple crisis will fail unless we choose to invite our home and lives to rejoin the earth, to rejoin the local, regional, and ecospheric fabric of life that you are inextricably a part of. Natural disasters are increasing in frequency and severity, and this will continue. And whether you experience one of these or not, rejoining the earth community is necessary. Fortunately, it is both attainable and rewarding, and it is a path that is at once personal, community-based, and societal in nature. Okay? I'm not talking about adapting to the increasingly extreme weather events triggered by fossil fuel emissions, which we need to do as well, and also decarbonize our ways to make a living. These, as important as they are, do not necessarily reconnect our lives to the fabric of life. So how do we do that? Our bodies are actually supremely tuned to engage with our surrounding environment, and both traditional wisdom and ever-growing body of scientific evidence supports the notion that spending regular periods of time in the natural setting resets and grounds our emotional and physical health, including decreasing blood pressure, heart rate, and cortisol, the chemical of stress in the body, for all age groups. While an urban congested environment narrows our sensory world in order to avoid overstimulation and chronic anxiety, the five senses all open up in a natural setting. As we attune to the sounds, textures, visual, auditory, and olfactory environments of the plants and animal community that we evolved to be a part of. Relaxing and opening our sensory world has been shown to decrease rates of depression, increase our sense of awe, and increase our creativity and mental function. Not only does increasing our time interacting improve our own health, it is essential for making the more than human world visible again. It is only then that the potential for rejoining the fabric of life becomes possible. There are many ways to not only spend more time in natural settings, but to actually deepen your connection to the landscapes you're a part of. Meditate on your interdependence with the plants and animals that are a part of the place you live. With every breath, you are connecting with the life-giving oxygen provided to you by the community of plants that eat light and breathe out oxygen for you to breathe in. This not only gives each cell in your body what it needs to live, each cell is built from elements, chemicals, and molecules provided by plants or animals that eat plants. Each thought in your brain is made possible through the metabolism of glucose, which was provided by plants. You cannot move, grow, or have a thought or feeling without plants capturing light and using the energy to make your life. Because of this deep connection to the plants and animals and landscapes surrounding us, traditional indigenous wisdom sees all parts of the more than human world around us as kin, not resources. This shift from object to subject means that just as with your human relatives, you treat them with respect and interest in their dynamics, just as you take an interest in your family stories. This is not a romantic concept, rather it is an acknowledgement of our interdependence with them that is no less than our human family and friends. Because we are kin with our more than human relatives, most traditional cultures speak directly to the living and even non-living beings surrounding us as a way of acknowledging its agency in our lives. This is pragmatic, not magical thinking, and it opens the possibility of deepening relationships with the other. Okay. So we're back to the bird tracks. Nature provides many entrance ramps to reconnect our lives back into the living web of life. And I'm here to discuss some of these. And specifically, the seasons. The seasons are literally a cycle that repeats itself every year, and like the earth revolving around the sun, has no starting or ending point. This eternally renewing cycle provides a completely local description of life that is unique to this place at this time, and it is waiting for you to join it anytime you want, any place you are, and all you have to do is go outside and open your senses to the planets. Even if you're outside, you may not feel like you are a part of the planet. So I'm going to show you this little thing that I learned in a movement that's been going for 30, 40, 50 years called the bioregional movement, and it's called the bioregional jump. So that's what this is here. And so I'd like everybody, if they can, to stand up. Because this is a sensory shift. Okay, this is the, yeah.
Just a little closer to the screen for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm being filmed.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm gonna read this and then we're gonna jump, okay? With this jump, I am jumping out of Lawrence. I am jumping out of that legal description called Douglas County. I'm jumping out of all those artificially imposed boundaries and devices that obscure the reality of Earth around me. I am jumping up into the air, out of Kansas, out of the United States, into the prairie winds. When I land, I am landing on soil-covered slope of a watershed, the Wakarusa watershed here, that is full of all kinds of life of which I am a part. When I land, I am landing in the Osage Cuesta ecoregion, landscapes full of the plant and animal communities of the tallgrass prairies and oak hickory woodlands. I land in land that drains into the Kaw River, which flows ultimately into the Gulf of Mexico. I am landing in the prairie bioregion, landing on the earth. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Welcome home. So what does this do? What does this do? What does removing and stripping away all that stuff do? Well, first of all, normally you would be doing this anytime you want outside, okay? So that then you can look around. You can actually go to the next slide here. And you basically are entering the space in the same way as the rest of the plant and animal communities are already spending their time in, okay? So let me kind of go through this. And, you know, this is good to do anytime. You can do it along a river, you can do it on a hiking trail, you can do it in your front yard, in the backyard, with friends, ideally, because I think there's a certain reinforcement when you do this together with somebody. And so basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about the place that you land, okay? The place that you land is unique. There's no other place on the earth like where you just landed. And so there's a lot to see. Go ahead and turn the page, or turn the page. So, you know, let's see, where am I? Turn the page too soon there. So suddenly we don't have watches, alarms, and calendars. Human time is replaced with ecological time. All these things are available in the landscapes we are part of and used by other plants and animals in the landscape. So each species of plant and animal has its own internal and environmental clock, and it keeps it, that keeps it healthy, safe, and oriented to the importance around it. Both plants and animals have internalized, let's see, skipping, oh, there we go, that are calibrated and modified by the external environment. The sunrise, these are the big ones. The sunrise, sunset, where the sun is in the sky, how losing it, or how long it is daylight, moonrise, moonset, the phase of the moon, the temperature and moisture in the land and in the air. Now, I'll say this one more time. All plants and animals use the locally sourced time calibration devices of sunrise, sunset, length of day and night, moonrise, phase of the moon, both air and soil temperatures, moisture, and of course, the complex dance of the weather. In other words, where it's coming from, you know, what form is the precipitation, if it's doing that, the severe weather, cloudiness, and all those things. So, go ahead and turn it there. The beauty and power of these natural clocks is that they interplay with each other in a way that makes this part of the planet unique and unlike any other place on the planet. They attract and maintain the plant and animal communities who live and pass through here, helping define the possibilities of place and what makes this ecoregion unlike any other place on the planet. If ecological time sets the clock and calendar of nature, ecological space defines the home or habitat where every plant and animal lives and moves around in the landscape. Just as clocks have obscured our awareness of ecological time, our uses of the property lines, city limit, county, state, and national borders have obscured the realities that the rest of the planet uses to relate to the land. Watersheds, slopes, and soils are what all plants and animals orient themselves to. All animals need to drink water, and they know precisely the places to find these sources, whether it is the closest creek, an intermittent puddle, or a juicy vegetation or fruit. They are acutely aware of the differences between the southern, sunny, dry slope and the northern, cooler, moist slope on a hill, and everything else in between. They know these details help determine, along with soils, where to find a given plant, whether it is for eating, creating shelter, or raising young. The comfort zones shift during the season, as does the time of day when it is the safest time to move around. Home ranges can be very limited for some animals and quite large for others, even within the same species, and of course changing throughout the year. Awareness of ecological time and space define how the web of life is tied to every place on the planet. So if you want to create an entrance ramp to nature in your life, you need to redevelop an awareness of nature. And fortunately, your body has evolved over time to attune itself to ecological time and space as effectively as it can learn how to calculate a return on your financial investment, to be able to drive a car, develop a career, or play a musical instrument. Next. So this is a quote from my book, Wild Douglas County. Consider the ocean. If you took a 1 acre square of water 1 mile from the shoreline and built a wall around it, people would think you were crazy. Everyone would understand that the waves that washed over that acre of water was a transitory phenomenon that began and ends somewhere else, and that it was sustained by the tides, the currents that pushed water and life forms through that abstract column of space. Everyone would also understand that to cut it off from those processes would be akin to killing that patch of the ocean, leaving it cut off from the sources that made it vital, healthy, and valuable. This is easy to see with the ocean, but the same relationship exists between the land, the life forms, the weather, and other processes that sweep across the landscape every day of the year, replenishing, healing, and giving them their value. Just as fish, phytoplankton, and kelp float through this acre of ocean without any awareness of the legal description, all manner of seeds, insects, birds, mammals, microorganisms, and other life forms ride the currents of air, water, and walk, dig, or grow in across that landscape that we parcel out and call our own. Okay. Watersheds do not start and stop at the property line. Woodlands cross state lines. Migrational patterns cross international boundaries. The web of life is composed of a dynamic, moving web of life that processes follow the changes wrought by the revolution of our planet around the sun. Not any historic treaty, law, or agreements change that. The processes and patterns found in Douglas County are seamlessly integrated into the rest of the planet because our planet is a single community, woven together with interdependent relationships. Getting to know the seasons of this region ties you to many, many other locations. Monarchs, turkey vultures, snow geese, and so many other locally accessible migrations connect us to Canada, Mexico, and even South America. In the same way, a watershed basin connects all the water within its slopes, connecting the land here with the water that flows down from upstream, passing through the area on its way down to the ocean. Okay. This is true with plants who actually migrated to this area over time after the retreat of the last ice age, aided by plants and animals. I remember walking in an area in the sand dunes in Manitoba, and there I found some big bluestone, which is the native dominant plant here. It connected me instantly to home. So back in the 80s, go ahead and, this is Prairie Park, Nature Center Prairie, for which almost nobody sees, in spite of it being, the Nature Center being called that. It's a 3 acre parcel, and it's over 9,500 years old. That's definitive, and it could be even longer, but we know it's been there for at least that long, which is twice as old as the pyramids. And this is a living community, and so this is one of our great gems of our area. There's other native unplowed prairies. I call them old growth prairies, and this is something that I give walks once a month, the third Saturday of the month out there at, well, in the winter time it's at 2 o'clock, and then come June, I move to 9 in the morning because it gets too hot. So I invite all of you to join me in one of these walks that happen. They're free, and they just take place at the appointed time. We spend an hour or so, sometimes longer, looking at what's going on, which is a lot since there's over 300 species of plants, let alone animals, insects, and fungi, and lichen and stuff. Okay? So in my first book, I published in 1985, I came up with, I was inspired by the bioregional movement they made circular charts showing the seasons I saw it in the Rocky Mountains initially. And you know, what struck me is, you know, time we treat as linear. It's not. It's cyclical. And so it is literally the Earth going around the sun. So there's no starting point, there's no ending point. And so I created a series of charts. I spent a few years just watching and trying to figure out, well, surely this exists in this area. You know, somebody's made these. Well, I hadn't yet. So I went ahead and made my own and hired a calligrapher. Back in the 80s, that's what we did. We hired people to do stuff. And so we came up with these series of charts. This is an overview showing, you know, grass is growing to seed. I'll just go through this time of year to see, because this was in 1985, and it's kind of interesting to sometimes see what shifts have occurred. And of course, it's upside down. It's the driest time of the year in January. Coyotes are calling. Deer lose their antlers a little bit later in the month. There's all kinds of things. We'll get into some of these details, but I just wanted to show. Also inside, there's this, these are the evening constellations in the sky, in the middle, okay? And there's a whole series of these charts. Go ahead. Prairie wildflowers, east and central. This is for the Kansas River Basin, which stretches from eastern Colorado to Kansas City and south of the Platte River in Nebraska down to about the middle of Kansas. So it's the size of Michigan, 80,000 square miles. So we had to generalize. This is east and central prairie wildflowers. The growing season, you can see, starts March and April and goes till October. The first freeze is pretty much the last flowering plants. Okay, next. And this is throughout in western. You notice that it shifted a little bit, but it starts a little bit later out west or throughout. And so those are prairie wildflowers. Continue. Woodland vegetation, there's an annual cycle that goes on. And the cool thing about this is that what happens now, you know, there's been climate change. Everybody thinks, well, everything's changing. Guess what? The sequence is about the same as it was 1,000 years ago. So you can actually visit the same landscapes as people that were settlers that came into the area, or the tribes that were here before them, or the tribes that were here before horses. You know, they saw the same sequence that is present today. Okay. Mammals, a lot of activity year-round, as you can see. And these are in my, because I ran out of these, I printed this book, Wild Douglas County, which is available at the Raven bookstore, and it's got the same charts in it because I just wanted to continue. They're not as pretty, I don't think, black and white. Anyway, continue. Insects, reptiles, and amphibians. What's going on there? Continue. Seasonal, year-round birds chart. Okay. The aquatic life. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through these because I don't know, we're doing pretty good on time, but still. Continue. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail of the cycle after this, after I show these charts. But this food from the land, it shows several things. Not only the agricultural cycle on the outside, it also shows harvesting stuff, and then in here, the names of the months of the moon for the Osage. You know, you think about, what is January? Well, it's actually one of the few that kind of makes sense, because Janus is a god that looked forward and backwards. So that, you know, tying into the linear conception of time, well, the time to take stock, to look back, and to look forward. That kind of makes sense, but as you can see, that's an arbitrary spot anyway. But, you know, the name of January is frost on the inside of the lodge moon. Well, that's pretty clear. And I really like the names because they're place-based. Next month, light of day returns. February, you get a huge increase in light, and so things start shifting. Just doing that moon in March is because all the little spring or if it's snowing, it's just doing that. If it's sunny, it's just doing that. So that's a great name for that time of year. Planting moon in April. Little flower killer moon, people have heard of the movie. Well, that's why it was called that, because the little flowers in the spring die out and they go to seed and they're replaced by taller flowers because the grasses are growing and everything's getting taller, and so they just call it, in a very poetic way, I think, little flower killer moon. Buffalo pawing moon, buffalo mating moon just shows the importance to the Osage of what the bison were in their way of living. A lot of times, the eastern Kansas tribes, they would plant their spring gardens, and then in June and July they would leave the grandparents and the kids at home to tend the gardens and to take care of things, and they would go out west to hunt bison for the year. So that's why those are two. Yellow flower moon, that's something that's basically there's a lot of sunflowers start blooming that time of year, and also goldenrods. And what's interesting is with climate change, that's kind of shifted more into September now. I mean, we're seeing a shift in the lengthening of the season. Deer hiding moon is the month when the deer are growing their antlers, and so they're very secretive, and you don't see them nearly as much. Deer mating moon, just like the bison, the deer were very important, and were chronicled that way in their months. Coon breeding moon, actually, my understanding is that that's not the time of year that the breeding happens, but that's when the families disperse, and so the families are dispersing, and so you're seeing them all around, and they figure that they're probably experimenting too, just like all teenagers, right? Baby bear moon is, the last black bear in Douglas County was in 1966 in the Baldwin Woods, and and they are now in every western Missouri county in the state of Missouri. So who knows? They may be coming back. And then we're back to the frost on the inside of the lodge. So let's go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail of each one of these. And I started with February because why not? It doesn't really matter where you start. And so these are things that happen here, and they don't happen if you go 100 miles east or west or south or north. There's a little shift that happens. The further north you go, the later it happens. The further south you go, the earlier, or the extension of the seasons. And so that's why it's kind of cool to learn this cycle here. And the cool thing is, wherever you go, you might see, like I saw the little blue stem up in Canada. There will be things that will remind you of home and connect you to that. And those are the things that weave the web of life together. On the left, upper left, the maples are starting to bloom, and on the upper right you have the elms. Those are the first two things to come out, really, even before a lot of the wildflowers. They come in January, February, sometimes January. And you have winter mushrooms. You've got the pleurotus mushroom and the puffball mushrooms are nice winter mushrooms that you see. This time of year, you hear a lot of coyotes howling at moonrise and other times. This is their mating season, so that's something that's why they're calling around so much. And mosses, you see lots and lots of mosses. They're greened up. It's one of the green things this time of year, so they jump out at you. Okay? March is a muddy time. So it's a great time to be tracking what's going on in the animal world, because they leave their tracks, and so you can read them. And there's also some early spring wildflowers, and the boreal chorus frog, you hear after a nice warming spell in March, sometimes even earlier, you'll hear them, and they start their mating calls around wet areas, and it can be a puddle, or it can be any type of wet area. Okay? Planting moon. It's traditional time for burning the prairies in the Flint Hills. You see in the front middle there, you've got the red buds. They're gorgeous, they're edible, they're a wonderful addition to anybody's, to notice those and appreciate them. They come in all shades of pink and purple and even white. Of course, morel season, and then spring wildflowers is kind of the flush of wildflowers in the woods happens in April. Before, by the end of April, the trees have come out, they've leafed out, and that shades the flowers, and they're done. They're already done by that point. So you have to get out there in the first part of April, late March to see the spring wildflowers. Okay, little flower color. If you noticed, I don't know if you noticed, these are a lot taller. They've gotten a lot taller. And they're pretty spectacular. A great place to see this. All of these are available at the Prairie Park Nature Center, Prairie. And also for those of us who have spring allergies, it's caused by, on the far right there, the brome pollinates, and there's literally clouds. Actually, if it starts earlier, it's a lot of times it's the cedar trees that pollinate. You can see just clouds of pollen billowing off those trees too. But that's one of the things about spring is the spring season of pollen. Okay. Buffalo plowing moon. Things are getting lush. A lot of prairie walks take place in June because there's just so much going on. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. You got dogwoods, and those are woody plants here, and you also have invasives like the musk thistle and the crown vetch, which are things that are problems in the area. But it's also berry season, so get out there and pick the raspberries and get chiggers, and then milkweeds of every, there's many different types of milkweeds. That's the common milkweed. If you haven't ever smelled a common milkweed, you need to improve your life. It's well worth your time just to go up to one and smell it, and it'll change it. So, July, the growing prairie, tallgrass prairies, they send up their seed heads, and so in a native prairie that's in good shape, it'll be over your head. And so that's something that is worth experiencing. You get the juggarum of the bullfrogs, elderberries are blooming, beautiful mints called bee balm are in the woods. It's a great time of year in July. It's kind of an intense time too, so that early in the day and after dark, a lot of things become nocturnal in July because of the heat. August, yellow flower moon. There's the sunflower, of course, and then there's a couple of different goldenrods. And goldenrods are not the cause of the end of the August pollen allergies that people sneeze at. It's the giant ragweed that blooms at the same time, and it produces way more pollen. These are insect pollinated, so they don't really produce windblown pollen, but a ragweed, I always like to say if it's a really dry year, it's a fantastic time for ragweed, and if it's a wet year, it's a fantastic time for giant ragweed, because it doesn't matter. It's always a fantastic year for ragweed. And that goes basically through the month of September as well. In our area, we oftentimes see the seagulls returning. They come and they check out our landfills and our, you'll see them in the spring sometimes during the planting season. They like lots of worms and stuff but people aren't plowing as much anymore, so it's more of a September thing, and they're kind of migrating through. There's always a lot of bounty this time of year. A lot of migratory waterfowl, they go to places that have lots of food so they can fuel their way further south. And You've got the purple flowers of the asters above the seagulls there. You got this beautiful plant called blue sage, which is in the middle top there, and on the right, I'm not sure what that is. I think those are more asters. Migration of the monarch butterfly, and once again, as I mentioned, the deer are growing their antlers, so that you see that, and hence the name for the month. Okay. And also in late September, you'll start seeing these patches in the woods that have been scraped free of leaves, and that's where the deer are starting to rut. And that's a precursor to the deer mating moon. The guys are going out there and they're scraping a hole and then peeing in it, so that's supposed to attract the females. I don't know. Whatever happens to us. Also, obviously, harvest time. It's a very important time of the year. Lots of, for humans, lots of fairs are, the state fair at least, it's in September though, isn't it? Yeah. So October, I guess, there's harvesting, there's hay and other things. I think that state fairs are kind of between, right before harvest, because that's too busy of a time. The colors changing in the woods and the prairies. The grasses turn just as spectacularly as the leaves in the woods, I think. And so you can tell the difference between a native prairie and a brome field, which is an imported grass, just by the color this time of year. So you can really identify where those native prairies are. Okay? November, certain things stay green, like the bristly greenbrier. Everything else is starting to lose their leaves, usually by the first week of November. The deer are in the thick of the mating season, and winter flocks start as it gets cold. And what that means is a lot of species of birds that normally really do not spend any time together, they come together. All the different species come together to look for food together. And so that's why bird feeders work really well. Also, you have bittersweet. A lot of people use that for decorations that time of year, so you can identify it. Do you have a question?
No, I was just discussing the bittersweet because we're 15 miles south of here. And we get the bittersweet in October, late October.
That's when it starts. You're right.
Yes,
They start opening up.
Right.
And actually, yeah, a lot of people harvest it in November just for the seasonal decorations.
Right, because by that time it's popped open
Right.
and you've got the more vibrant orange.
Yes.
Yeah, orangey red.
Yeah, and that picture is probably taken in October actually, because it's not opened up yet. That's great. Okay. December, little baby bare moon. There's also, you see a lot of hedge apples that have been chewed on by squirrels. They break it open and they'll eat the seeds in the middle. I heard that they were edible, so I actually opened one up and harvested all the seeds. Well, that it didn't say that. It's sort of like a sunflower seed. In addition to that, you have a little shell that you have to break off of each one. It wasn't worth it. Leave it to the squirrels. Lots of moss, once again, start greening up. And you see the berries, those are from cedars. The cedars start dropping some of those, and they drop them all winter long. And you have these beautiful time for walking. I think it's one of the best times because you don't have to worry about insects. You have seed heads of the tall grasses, and it's thinner, and you don't have to. It's just you can see more wildlife because all the leaves are gone. So it's a great time for walking. January, the eagles are back. Squirrel nests on the right, and of course you have ice and snow. It's a great time to be outside. It really is. You can see all kinds of things, and if you have snow, you have tracks, so you can really see what's going on in your, on the land that you're walking in. Okay, and then we're back because it just keeps going. This process just keeps going around and around and around, and this is what defines our place, and that's why that's something that I think is an essential part of reconnecting to the web of life, because this is literally the web of life in our area. And so next, I do a weekly nature update, Kaw Valley Almanac.com, I think. And you can check those. It tells you the moon phases, it tells you the sunrise and sunset, where the planets are in the sky. A picture, and then it says what the picture's about, and then points to look at for that week in nature. And so feel free to check it. It's free. It's just something that, what it does is it forces me to go outside every week and see what I'm going to write about, if I haven't already done that. And so, as you can see, this is last week, and so I took pictures of birds on my rail in a snowstorm because they were very active. And I also did it made me, I was worried, well, what about avian flu? Is that a problem in my bird feeder? So I made some phone calls, did some correspondence. It turns out that the avian flu is primarily in waterfowl, the geese, the ducks, shorebirds, and they're not really affected very much by if at all, in the songbird communities, and that's good. But I also was told that every 2 weeks you should take your bird feeder or wherever you're feeding your birds and kind of wipe it down with some diluted bleach water, because there's other diseases that can be transmitted by collection, by things coming together in the same place. So if there's a sick bird, it can spread it through the bird feeder. So if you just spray it down and wipe it out every few weeks, then that'll keep that to a minimum. So, Aldo Leopold. Okay, we're getting close to the end, folks, which is good. He wrote Sand County Almanac in 1949. After he died, it was published. And it's one of I would recommend that book to everybody. One of the things that he wrote is, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. This is his call for humanity to become guardians and fully participating members of that biotic community once again. A call that rings true to this day. It is difficult to measure the integrity, stability, and beauty of that biotic community without each of us, in whatever ways we can, to become familiar enough with the seasons and cycles of this area. And if you move to reconnect to that area in the same way, whether you are a landowner, a renter, or even a migrator through choice or by chance. So the three things that I think about in terms of addressing the triple crisis, there's so much out of our control that we can't do. But the three things to help us to reconnect, which is essential for the success of any of us to get through this, is first thing is to rejoin the earth by inviting your more than human kins into your life and the lives of your friends and family. So you bring people along. Second is to get to know the local issues that threaten what is left and get involved. And there's lots of people in this circle here that are doing just that can inform you. And the third is, from your station in life, be an advocate for decarbonizing our lives and nurturing biodiversity. And these are, the decarbonization is what's changing, that will return the chemistry of the atmosphere back to where it was, okay? It's gonna take centuries, even if we stop today. But if we don't, it's gonna take even longer. And nurturing biodiversity, once again, the prairie used to be 85% of Douglas County. Now it's less than 1/2 of 1%. So that doesn't mean that there's not nooks and crannies all over the place, but we can nurture that. If we can get the prairies and the native woods through this bottleneck, it can come out the other side, and we'll be all richer for it. So That's it.